mean? Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Ray Rice was suspended indefinitely by the NFL Monday, as we've been telling you here on Good Day. It happened hours after this video was released. It shows Rice punching his then fiance, now wife, in the face, dragging her out of the elevator. Domestic violence is a fact of life for too many people. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 31% of women in the United States have been physically abused by an intimate partner at some point in their lives. So what do we need to know about domestic violence? All of us, not just women, but men too. Leslie Gustafson, marriage therapist, is here to answer our questions. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
I wish it were under better circumstances.
Yeah, but a good opportunity to educate about domestic violence, which is incredibly prevalent. And, you know, we don't often talk about it because it doesn't come to our awareness. But the reality is that half of female homicides are domestic violence. 80% of those prior to the homicide had abuse already happening. So there is, you know, lots of signs and symptoms along the way that don't get noticed and or they're denied. And so women, primarily women, 95% of domestic violence cases are women, which is really high. Yes, there are sometimes men who are harmed in a similar scenario, but primarily we're talking about men harming women in intimate relationship here.
And in this case, it's so public. And Janie Rice said in her statement, "This is our life, what don't you get?" It's private, personal matter, but it's in the public eye, and it's played out in a situation where there are all these fans involved. So how do you get involved? How do you help in a situation where you know something's going on, but you don't want to invade someone's privacy?
Well, I think the privacy issue gets set aside for the safety and the love for another, which is to, at least out of care and concern, draw this person alongside and say, this should not be happening, and why are you staying? Now, it's very complicated why women do stay, because while it starts out usually fairly benign, the relationship starts out with love, to some degree, or at least it feels like it, but what gets overlooked is the other behaviors of controlling, that there's often jealousy, paranoia, there's increasing shrinking of the woman's world because they start to isolate them more and more, take more and more control. Then the threats start coming in, maybe some put downs. And so increasingly the woman is starting to be pulled away from support and community. And then there's times where he's very good to her. And then it increases and it escalates. Sometimes there's a pushing or a shoving, and that's first sign on top of these other subtle signs that get ignored, denied, and overlooked and minimized by the woman, and him too. Because he will then, after something bad happens, spin it in such a way that he minimizes or blames her or excuses the behavior, and they both go, oh yeah, that'll never happen again. But that's just all part of the domestic violence cycle, because in fact it does happen again, because he starts to see her as a threat in some way, really distorted thinking, but needs to control her, keep her in a subservient position. And he does that more and more in more and more harmful ways. At this point, for her, what's happening is there's still the denial, but there's an awful lot of fear because of the threats. Then she's starting to become more and more confused, blames herself too often, takes responsibility for his bad behavior. If I just hadn't have done that, he wouldn't have done that.
Right.
And so there is kind of more and more she becomes helpless, hopeless, powerless, feels unlovable, self-esteem gets damaged. And the real truth is, and this is the sad truth, and I wouldn't want to keep any woman from getting help, but the risk for harm to her increases as she starts to pull away and wants to get safe and leaves.
Definitely. Leslie, thank you so much for the perspective. It's always good to see you. Sad situation.
Yes, but please, women, get help. Help is out there. Safety is first priority, and if you have someone that you know, encourage them at least to call the domestic violence hotline, which is 800-799-SAFE.
That's the key. Leslie, thank you. Let's check in.